Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. More specifically, a brand new Albums I Missed video. That's right, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. We've reached that magical time of the month where I look back at everything released in the previous month, and we talk about it. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that just wild? Y'all should know the drill by now. There are albums that I didn't get the chance to review in a full-blown video. Maybe there were just a bunch of albums coming out a certain week, and unfortunately this got pushed to the side, it got pushed out of the spotlight. Maybe it's something a little bit more underground that just slipped under the radar entirely. Maybe it's something that popped up out of nowhere. Maybe it's something I just didn't really care all that much about, but I felt like I should maybe talk about it in some capacity here today. Right now. Whatever the case, we're talking about a bunch of music, albums I missed, March 2024, let's go. First up, we have In the Twilight Grey from Necrophobic. This is the 10th full-length studio album from this long-running Swedish melodic blackened death metal crew, and it's great. It's tight, it's mean, it's gnarly, it's brutal, but it's also got these melodic, epic, shimmering guitar pyrotechnics and dynamics akin to what I honestly might expect of like a classic heavy metal record. Necrophobic also isn't afraid to go into some slightly more ambitious and cinematic territory from time to time, which I also really appreciate. Take, for instance, the song As Stars Collide. A much more dramatic and evocative number, I would say. Necrophobic kind of dipping their toes into some symphonic black metal territory here with some really beautiful string and keyboard work. Necrophobic also just does a really good job at keeping things like fresh and varied across the album. They do a good job at introducing a bunch of different types of riffs and melodies and rhythms and tempos. Like, even if some songs are following semi-similar blueprints from time to time, I never feel as if I'm, like, listening to the same song over and over. I will say that some songs are maybe just a little itty-bitty bit too long for my personal liking. Maybe just, like, a teensy-weensy little fucking extra fat that, you know, could have been cut off. It wasn't, but it could have. But I mean, hey, the album still clocks in at a respectable 54-minute runtime, and it's pretty action-packed from start to finish. Very solid record. Had I reviewed it, we'd be looking at a pretty solid 4 out of 5, you know? Maybe leaning slightly towards a 3.5 out of 5, but a 4 nonetheless. Next up, we have Hellish Expectations from Midnight, and to be honest, even I'm shocked that I didn't review this. Really, I am, because this is the kind of thing that would normally be right up my alley. It's sleazy, it's dark, it's in your face, and super aggressive and provocative. It's like all the best parts of Venom, Motorhead, and very early Metallica all kind of rolled into a fucking greasy little ball. And I did enjoy the album. For the record, I just found that when it was time to potentially put a review together, I really didn't have a lot to say. Midnight have kind of been around for a while now. They have an established sound and style and formula. They've never really strayed from it, and this album is no exception. Put very simply, if you enjoyed previous Midnight albums like Satanic Royalty, Rebirth by Blasphemy, Let There Be Witchery, whatever else have you, there's a pretty solid chance you're gonna like this. I think the only thing I can really add to the conversation here is, while I was enjoying the album, at no point was I really enjoying this as much as some of those other albums that I've just mentioned. And maybe it's because Midnight is getting kind of predictable at this point, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old and this style is not resonating with me the same way it was a couple of years back. I don't know. I honestly don't fucking know. Whatever the case, Hellish Expectations is still a pretty decent album, all things considered. It's fun, it's straight to the point. I just didn't really see a need to really dedicate a full album review to it. Next up, we have Profane Prayer, brand new studio album from Greek thrash metal crew Suicidal Angels. And I'm kind of digging it, not gonna lie. It's not blowing my mind or anything, but you know, it's a solid release. Look, y'all know me. I can be kind of picky when it comes to thrash metal, you know? I want to hear something new. I don't want to hear the old stuff. I've already heard the old stuff. I'm good. We need to move on from the old stuff. Oh my god. But you know what? Credit to Suicidal Angels. They're doing a pretty decent job. Feels like a good mix of like aggressive and melodic influences from like Testament, Death Angel creator. Like, there's lots of really cool, really fast, really tight, really flashy guitar work on this bad boy. Very clean and very crisp production, some solid hooks and melodies all across the board. A few, like, small twists and turns here and there as well. Deathstalker especially throws quite a few curveballs at you. It moves at a very slow and dramatic pace. It's got acoustic guitars and tons of special guests and chanting vocals and some really epic soaring twin guitar leads. Honestly, I think if I had more songs like Deathstalker across the album, these moments that just genuinely catch me off guard and surprise me and show me something different, I think I'd be really loving this album. As it stands though, hey, warts and all, it's clean, it's crisp, it's mean, it's everything that most people really want from a modern thrash metal record, so who am I to argue? Next up, we have Fragments of the Ageless from Skeletal Remains, who are very quickly at this point becoming one of the most consistent and reliable kind of like modern death metal bands out there. I mean, they are just consistently dropping twisted, sick, gnarly fucking shit. Not only is this record not an exception, but it's arguably their biggest and their heaviest album to date, with some of their best written and their most sonically heavy riffs and beats and barrages and such, with some of their best production work to date. It completely pummels and pounds, with each song cram-packed like a can of sardines, with grooves and gnarly beatdowns and bombastic blast beats. It's maybe a little bit of a one-trick pony, like you're not going to see too many twists and turns and curveballs on this bad boy, but honestly, in this instance, I don't think you really need too many. It's just ferocious and intense and highly entertaining. There really isn't a dull moment on this record whatsoever. No fat, no filler, no duds. Not a single moment that I think is not up to par. If you liked previous Skeletal Remains records, I don't see why you wouldn't love this. If you ever wanted to hear what it might sound like if Cannibal Corpse and the Black Dahlia Murder ever fused into one, definitely check this out as well. Definitely fun, definitely worth your time. Next up, we have a self-titled album from long-running American melodic death metal crew, The Absence, who I've never really paid like a ton of attention to in the past, so I can't really tell you where this stands in comparison to other The Absence albums, whether it's good or bad in comparison to other things that they've done, but I can tell you that if you're looking for an old school Swedish melodic death metal style record, boom, this is it. You have found it. This is a full-blown homage to like classic material from At the Gates, Soilwork, Dark Tranquillity. These guys have clearly done their homework in replicating a lot of the things, a lot of the techniques and tricks that made these bands and a lot of their most iconic albums so successful. You've got that aggressive, venomous, almost barking vocal tone. You've got tons of acoustic, fantastical musical intros and interludes across the album. You've got like fast-paced, almost kind of like thrashy riffage and instrumentation. The guitars even do like a pretty good job at replicating that kind of like dark, raw feel of like the kind of guitar work you might hear on like an early At the Gates record as well. To the point where if you told me that this had come out in maybe the mid to late 90s, early 2000s at the latest, I honestly might have believed you, you know? Like it just kind of feels like something from that era, you know? It just captures that vibe and that aesthetic really nicely. It probably won't win too many points for originality or creativity, at least not from me anytime soon, but you know what? As far as I can tell, it was just trying to be like an old school melodic death metal throwback album, and it succeeds at being exactly that. I dig it. Check it out. Next up, we have Asylum from Atrophy. This is the third full-length studio album and the first in nearly 24 years from this American old-school thrash metal crew. And I got a lot of requests to review this album, and I'm kind of not sure why. I don't really get it. It's not really like bad or anything. It's just kind of bland. It sounds like everything that every B- C+ tier underground thrash crew was doing back in the day, except now it's louder because it has more modern production, I guess. It's definitely got lots of energy and enthusiasm, I'll give it that. It's arguably on par with the most recent Morbid Saint album in that regard, but where Morbid Saint succeeds over Atrophy is in just creating more interesting songs that are slightly more varied, slightly more dynamic, and frankly, way heavier. I'm not really sure why a lot of people are hyping this thing up. I mean, I guess if you just fucking love thrash metal, then fucking go for it. But yeah, I'm definitely in the mood for something with a lot more spice and sizzle and flavor. I'd much rather go revisit the Suicidal Angels record or the Morbid Saint record over this. Like, this just did not do it for me. Sorry, guys. Next up, we have Antithesis from Suldusk, which, as far as I can tell, is the sophomore studio album from this Australian atmospheric black metal, post-metal, dark folk fusion crew, and I am loving this right now. I mean, this thing is immaculately produced, emotionally charged, it's so immersive, genuinely like a really beautiful and heartfelt experience from start to finish. And though comparisons to the likes of Mirkr and Sylvain are pretty valid, I gotta say, I think I find myself enjoying this more than anything that either Mirkr or Sylvain have done, at least in recent memory. I love the vocal work on here. I love that we can have these really soft, clean, hypnotic, gloomy vocal tones, and then just these like glass-shattering shrieks and screams. I love how dark folk and neo-folk music is woven through. It actually also reminds me a lot of Hex Vessel in that sense. I like that there's a lot of scale to this, like it feels quite vast, but it also still feels like really organic. And the songs themselves are honestly just really pretty. Like, there's a polish and depth to these songs that also simultaneously reminds me of Alcest. In my opinion, what we have here is one of the more interesting and unique black metal style albums of the year so far. One of the best albums we're talking about in this video, also today right now, and I highly recommend it. And now, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, I present to you Barrage of Brutality, the debut album from SemiRotted featuring... oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Jeremy Spencer! Of Five Finger Death Punch, Psychosexual, and Psycho Sinner fame. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm so fucking elated to be talking about this right now. My dick is harder than a diamond in an ice storm. I don't think it would be unfair whatsoever for me to suggest, nay, outright claim that I am the #1 Jeremy Spencer hater within the YouTube metalverse. Because nobody has talked about Psycho Sinner and Psychosexual and Jeremy Spencer and trashed him and them as much as I have. Not Metal Trenches, Thralls of Metal, Forge Master, Metal Reviews, Wyatt X, him. Nobody. Period. No fucking nobody! And though Psycho Sinner is no longer with us, Jeremy Spencer is still kicking. He's got this brand new band, SemiRotted, that he's been kind of hyping up for a while now, and I felt, considering my status as the #1 Jeremy Spencer hater within the YouTube metalverse, I was obligated to review this album in a full-blown album review. But when the time came and this album dropped, I realized that, yeah, SemiRotted is thoroughly mediocre and not good. Barrage of Brutality, not a good album. But it's also just not very fun to make fun of. It just didn't really draw that same level of anger and disgust out of me that Torch the Faith and, like, all 11 Psycho Sinner albums did, you know? Like, it just fucking didn't. I was bored. I was rolling my eyes. I cringed a couple of times. I mostly just thought the album was big and dumb and loud, you know? A very straightforward, meat and potatoes, kind of groove metal, death metal record, with a few kind of bright spots, I guess. Will Ramos from Lorna Shore shows up. Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse show up. They bring their unique vocal prowess to SemiRotted occasionally, and honestly, that's appreciated. Honestly, that is. And I will say, Jeremy Spencer overall sounds much better in this band than he does in Psycho Sinner. I'm very happy I will never have to hear Devil Daddy crooning on a new album ever again, or at the very least, hopefully not for a very long time. But just because something is an improvement doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Like, this isn't necessarily post-Taco Bell explosive diarrhea, but it's still crap, you know? It's still shit. Like, it honestly just kind of feels like if Five Finger Death Punch tried to write a death metal record, you know? Like, it's very simple and very dumb, and it just sounds like knuckles being dragged and skulls being bashed, you know? That's what it fucking sounds like. Maybe in a couple of years, SemiRotted can drop something that'll fucking blow my mind, but for now, yeah, I don't really picture this thing having the impact and infamy of Psychosexual and Psycho Sinner. So, yeah, quite frankly, I imagine I'll forget about this, like, the moment this video's online, so. You tried, Jeremy. I'll give you credit. You actually did try, but, yeah. Moving on. Next up, we have Maze Envy, brand new studio album from Los Angeles-based death metal powerhouse Civerous, and honestly, I cannot believe that something this sick and twisted and dark and destructive as this is coming out of a city as sunny and glamorous as Los Angeles. What the fuck? This thing is just fucking dope, dude. I mean, it's got fucking beefy riffs all throughout, disgusting vocals, weird bass work. It has this really, like, massive, claustrophobic, consuming feel and vibe and atmosphere. Tons of, like, tiny little nuggets of, like, technical, fucked up fucking bullshit. Some really cool and eerie and mysterious kind of, like, instrumental stuff popping up across the record as well. Derek Rigquist of the Zenith Passage and John Frum also makes an appearance on this record, contributing some more fucking ghastly vocals. Like, this is my kind of stuff right here. Like, this thing is pretty smart and pretty fucking demented and just super fucking brutal. I just love how, like, powerful and twisted this whole thing is. I'd never heard of them until recently. Apparently this is their third studio album. This definitely inspires me to check out more and more of their stuff. I'm loving this. Another favorite of mine from this month of March 2024. Speaking of favorites, let's talk about my number one favorite album of this month. My number one favorite album that we're talking about in this video from Slimelord. Let's talk about Chytridiomycosis Relinquished. I probably butchered that first fucking word in there. We're just gonna call it... We're not gonna call it anything. It's the new Slimelord album. It's fucking sick. This thing has such a gross, slimy, mesmerizing feel to it, you know? It definitely reminds me of, like, some other kind of, like, 20-buck spin death metal bands, like Tomb Mold comes to mind, Ulthar comes to mind. I'm also reminded of, like, some really, like, experimental, avant-garde kind of stuff from Pyron, Spectral Voice, Thentifaxaf. Like, it's just monstrous and weird and gross. It has these convulsing, churning riffs and passages, layers upon layers of, like, dense death metal madness. Some really strong and brutal and perverse vocal work as well across the record. Tons of weird, slimy grooves and frightening arrangements. There were a lot of requests for me to review this one, and I can definitely understand why. This, much like the Civerous record, is right up my fucking alley. This is my kind of shit right here. Next up, we have Amalgamations of Gore, brand new sophomore studio album from brutal death metal crew Mutilation Barbecue, and yes, this album is every bit as brutal and silly as its name suggests. Quite a few puns and over-the-top brutal and goofy song lyrics and titles and such, lots of slammin' sections, tons of beefy fucking riffage, that signature brutal death metal snare, those signature brutal death metal vocals, some more erratic, frantic kind of sections, some kind of like death grindy-esque progressions. Occasionally this album can be a little bit more varied and versatile in the vein of, say, something like Homicidal Ecstasy from Sanguisugabog. This is definitely a prime example of just turn your fucking brain off and don't really think about what's happening, you know? Like, these guys are very self-aware, and they're writing really silly shit. Really not much more to say. If you're looking for some fucking carnivorous, brutal death metal with a bit of a sense of humor, go for it. Have fun. Next up, we have Social Grace, debut studio album from Brat. These guys have a pretty crusty, underground, primitive kind of vibe and feel, mixing a lot of like death metal and hardcore. This feels very much in the realm of like very early Venom Prison. I like how loud and aggressive and pummeling and in your face the record is. I like how unapologetic it is as well. I like how lyrically it deals with dystopian issues and problems, societal ills and such. I like some of the more punky and even grindcore-esque progressions and fills and riffs here and there, giving this thing a little bit of extra kick and spice and flavor when necessary. And I really like the intensity and the fast pace of this record as well. Like, it's able to do and say a lot within, like, barely 21 minutes. I like this album. I like it a lot. And I think if you're looking for some death metal, hardcore kind of shit with maybe just a little bit of a twist, this might be it. This might do it for you. And finally, let's start wrapping things up with Ecclesia Militans, brand new studio album from Ecclesia, who I was made aware of by Hammerheart Metal Reviews. Shout out to Hammerheart Metal Reviews. How you doing? Hello, bud. What's up? This is definitely one of the most unique albums we're talking about today. These guys have cited influence, at least as far as I can tell, from Candlemass, Solstice, Tony Martin era Black Sabbath. You can definitely hear little bits and pieces of all that. I also kind of hear Cathedral at times, and I'm also reminded of the dark melodic metal of a band like Witherfall. There's a lot of great dynamic hooks and melodies across the record here. It has an amazing, rich atmosphere, but perhaps most interestingly, they utilize like organs and guitars and chanting vocals in a way that feels like really spiritual. It's like epic doom metal, but written, performed, and produced in the name of our Lord and Savior. Like, it's just really cool shit, and it has this really powerful, omnipotent feel and presence. It's just such a fascinating combination of sounds and ideas and ingredients. Like, you'll have this really aggressive fucking riff edge, and it just kind of gets you hyped up, and then you'll have these soaring vocals and this really powerful, like, fucking organ work that just sounds like the heavens opening up, like I'm at fucking Sunday church service all of a sudden. Just a great record, in my opinion. This is definitely a band I'll be paying closer attention to in the near future. I would say that this is tied with the aforementioned Suldusk record for being, like, one of my faves of this month. Like, this is just so fucking cool. And voila, that is it. Those are all of the albums that I feel I missed in the month of March 2024. But of course, there's always more. There's always more stuff that doesn't get addressed and slips between the cracks and whatever else have you. So now it's your job to tell me and everyone else in the comment section below or on Discord if you like about other albums that came out in March that everyone's got to check out. I probably wouldn't review it because we're moving on, but I'll happily check it out for shits and giggles. Press this button to subscribe right here so you can get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately in case you somehow aren't getting them already. Look, there's even more videos here, and as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.